Yeah, I'm Ed Seymour from Red Hat. I work in our consulting part of the business, so that's professional services. I've actually been involved with SEMAT from quite early on. I was at the inaugural meeting in Zurich, and when I was actually working at Fujitsu at that time, and presented at that meeting. But since being at Red Hat, we've sort of taken SEMAT and helped it with our professional services. So I was going to talk to you today really is around kind of some of the experiences that we'd had with that. So a little bit about Red Hat. So Red Hat is the world's #1 or leading provider of open source solutions. So the model that we have at Red Hat is that there's thousands or actually millions of open source projects and hundreds of open source companies and organizations, and we sort of take those from what we call the upstream and provide enterprise hardened solutions. So we don't actually own any IP in the products that we provide. Our business model is around a sort of an operational expense, so we sell subscriptions to sort of curated software. We provide software certifications and hardware and things like this, so that people know that the software is supported and capable to run in an enterprise. But our culture really derives from those sort of open source principles, so it's around freedom, collaboration, and innovation. And in particular, we're working with a lot of organizations and a lot of partners, both upstream and in the delivery of solutions, we need to be able to collaborate and speak all the same language with the way that we work. So what we find is that every project that we tackle is different. So if I talk a little bit about what we're doing in consulting, is that we're trying to be, we're not a massive organization in terms of our professional services. Our role really is to be an enabler for the open source products and solutions and capabilities that our customers are trying to develop. So we need to align with those customers and help sort of de-risk their projects and get them kick-started and operating in an effective and efficient way. So really, it's around developing those comprehensive, cost-effective solutions for our customers. So the way that we engage with our customers is really listening to them, understanding what they want, understanding those business objectives, and seeing how that we can work together collaboratively to deliver those solutions. And so what we find is that all of these projects that we have with every different customer, we're having different requirements for the different ways of working that we'd operate with those customers. I'll talk about this, and as Eva also mentioned, with sort of method wars and things like that, there are lots of different methods that are coming up. So we're different domains that we work in. People want to use different approaches. I was working with a customer last week, and they wanted to use waterfall. We talked them out of it. Scrum is still very popular. We're seeing Scrum being introduced more often in projects, but also things like behavioral-driven development and different techniques that customers want to use. So part of the challenge that we've got as well is that our product portfolio is quite diverse. So it goes from platform stuff like operating systems, deploying operating systems, to middleware capabilities, so enabling development teams, so the tools that developers would use, the integration libraries and services and solutions that they might use, as well as more advanced emerging technologies, also developing capabilities, so looking at process within an organization and helping them develop more and align their business with DevOps principles, for example. So we've got quite a broad church that we need to cover, and you can imagine there are lots of different approaches and techniques that cover all of those different things. And also, when we engage with our customers, there are different levels of maturity. So we could be engaging to help standardize their environment, so provide greater standardization if they've got a heterogeneous environment, trying to provide a way through that complexity. They may have standards already in place, but they want to help optimize that and make that better. And then latterly would be sort of business automation, so looking at their overall environment and trying to optimize that and do really drive their business, so have sort of business-focused IT. The other way is the other sort of differences that we're seeing is around the scale of those projects. So we could be doing single-day engagements where we're maybe sort of pre-sales or we're scoping, and we need to go in and have consistency with that customer just on a very brief time scale. We may be doing proof of concepts, which could go from, say a week to, a month, where we're talking, we're doing things like architectural spikes and trying out different technologies. Pilots, stabilizing the architecture for an environment and basically creating an architecturally complete solution and enabling them to scale out. And so in each of those different types of scenarios, we've got different lengths of projects. So we can have from 1 day to, over a year in terms of a project. But what we found with adopting SEMAT and using Essence is that we can make every project the same, and we can have these common touch points that connect with with every project that we work on. So we've got different ways that we've adopted SEMAT and using Essence within Red Hat. Primarily at the moment within the EMEA region, the architect team are looking at different ways to do that. The primary way really is around supporting those engagements. So we've been using it as planning, helping us set the agenda within the engagements. We've experimented with high-level tracking and been able to track projects so that you get project governance, consistent project governance, and look at a big picture across a number of different diverse projects with different customers. And we're also using it to support the way that we communicate, so the way that we share. So we talked about our open source values. Sharing and knowledge sharing within our organization and with our customers is really important. And so we need better ways to communicate and share that information. So this is sort of how we're using with planning. We use the cards a lot, and they're well worn for alpha state to do the planning around the alpha states. So in pre-sales engagements, whereas before we were actually in a billable role with engagement with a customer, we're looking to effectively help set the agenda and sort of understand, where is the customer right now with the opportunity? Where have we got this from the sales team? How well understood is that opportunity? And making sure that we've got stakeholders, the right stakeholders involved, and that we're getting people engaged with that process, so that we can actually progress this into a billable opportunity. So we find that the things like the alpha state cards are very helpful for providing with us with checklists, so that we can check through different aspects of that. And when we move into larger engagements where we're actually starting to deliver some value within that customer, we can focus on things like the software system and requirements. And it's helping us there to really set those agendas for those workshops, make sure that we're covering all of those requirements. We're looking at software requirements, we're looking at the software system, and we can set goals for achievement within those workshops. And then once we're developing those, we're in a larger, longer term project where we're actually delivering and implementing capabilities. It's more about scaling out to a larger team, managing the work, and ensuring that we've got a way of working which is collaborative and working with the customer and the partners on that engagement. So this was done this a couple of times in Sweden. with some government agencies within Sweden. And so they were using SEMAT cards to mark up and set the agendas with the customer. So we would say, right, these are the things that we want to look at within our agenda, and we're using the SEMAT cards as a way of identifying this is where we think you are right now, and this is what we want to do. And so these are the things that we're going to do. And you'll see that we've got things like activity and techniques which aren't part of the essence. There are things that we've added in, and I'll talk about how we add those in later. I've also used this myself in engagements where we're doing things like statements of work, where we need to set, define the contracts that we have for our time and materials engagement with that customer. And so helping, things like the activity spaces and the goals are really good ways of defining the scope of our professional services engagement with that organisation. So we've experimented a little bit with a dashboard. One of our architects created a website where we could upload status checks. So you could pull up for every project. You'd get the 7 alphas, and then be able to look at the current state of that. And so you'd be able to compare projects against each other. So we're having another look at this, see if we can improve it. It used a spreadsheet at the moment, so you entered the information in a spreadsheet and then uploaded it, and then you present it. And what you'd have is then a number of checkpoints for each project. So every time you uploaded a new checkpoint, that would be your new status. So that's why in this one it's unchanged, but you'd see whether or not you'd had a change between state checkpoints. But this was, we feel that this is a good way when we start looking holistically across our projects, be able to understand really the progress and state of each of those projects. And what we'll be doing is really taking particular key points within this and having our own life cycles for different types of engagement, where we can say within this engagement, because we've achieved these states across here, then we've achieved a high-level life cycle phase within that engagement. Or if we haven't achieved that, then these are the things that we need to progress to get that. So another area to look at is the common framework. We've developed this Red Hat Architect framework, which is essentially the approach that we're using to collate all of our information, all of our techniques and activities that we use. So the Essence provides the framework, the hangers for all of our information and ways of working, and we can then slot in our approaches within that Essence framework. It's also a way for us to articulate those things. So we talked about using Essence as a language to develop your new practices. So whilst existing approaches can be brought in without changing their language, we can also then go and sort of reimagine or revise those processes and bring them in and use the Essence language. So typically we have at the moment techniques which are things that we would do within a particular activity. So these are specific approaches that we've got to solving certain types of problems in a particular way. So we've got, as an example, we talk about a 9-block model approach, which is a way that something that we use in architecture workshops for trying to find the non-functional requirements of an infrastructure solution. So we have that marked up, and then that's slotted into this process. So activities are higher level approaches that sit within the activity spaces provided by Essence. And then more generalized things that we expect our consultants to be doing, but a sort of a mode of working that we would expect them to pull in different techniques in order to achieve that. We haven't really got as far as developing practices and methods yet, but that's certainly where we're heading with some of these techniques. And so what we find then is this kind of model that we've got where we're pulling things in together. So things like the proof of concept practice would be a life cycle practice which defines how we want to progress states through a proof of concept, for example. So the final one is really around process improvement. So we were looking at, we had a number of different processes and approaches that we use within our organization. And these typically are defined in terms of the tools and around governance. So we might have, for instance, for doing a proof of concept, it will go through various approval states, really. So it's not really telling you how to do a proof of concept. It's not telling you why you want to do a proof of concept. It's just making sure that you're getting it checked by this person and that person, that we've got the resources available, and that, you know, that organisationally we think it's a good idea to do this. So what we've been doing is taking essence really and looking at that and trying to bring out the value from this. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? What's the purpose of doing this? And then really creating a much richer practice which sits around that original requirement and that original process, and is described in terms that relate to the essence kernel. So where are we going? So we need to do a bit more to establish SEMAT. At the moment it's used as a tool, I would say, within our organisation. There is increasing adoption around it as a framework for creating new process. We are currently going through a sort of a process renaissance within the organisation, and we've got people looking at developing our processes and optimizing our processes better. And the intention is that we will be using SEMAT and the essence kernel as a way to present those. We have a lot of process at the moment which is described in terms of flowcharts, which aren't very useful. People can kind of understand it when they look at it, but it's not easy to really understand where the value is and how we actually want to work better with that. And so we're looking at those and redescribing them is in using the essence kernel and making sure that we're covering all of our needs within those processes. I talked about the tracking tools. It's definitely an area that we are going to be developing further and seeing if we can create better tracking tools with that. I think the guys are quite keen to start using the new container technology, so we might see a tracking tool as a container that we can deploy anywhere to use that. Yeah, so that's effectively us. That's Red Hat, and that's how we're using SEMAT. Have I got time for
Thank you. We have time for questions and discussions. Anyone, please?
Hi.
How many people, or how big is the group that's currently using this technical stuff?
So the architecture group sits across the whole of EMEA, and that feeds down into the main body of consultants. So we've got consultants that are based within specific regions. So I'm in the UK, so we've got consultants within the UK. There are about 20 or 30 of us working in the UK. The architect group spans the whole of EMEA, and there's about 10, 15 of those guys that are operating in this sort of overlay across EMEA. So the idea is that we're doing from the architecture level, we're setting that, we're using SEMAT to describe our processes, and then pushing that down into each of the regions. And we're getting a little bit of pull from the States, but that's a bit slow at the moment. Yes?
What is your business case for using SEMAT? And I mean, how did you convince upper management to do the investment of your process improvement group, the tools, all the things you do, and what is your benefit? What do you get out of it?
So I think there's a recognition within management that we need to do work around process. Red Hat is a rapidly growing company. We need to be able to scale, so they've identified that as a kind of an opportunity or problem that needs to be solved. So there is investment in process development. What we are demonstrating with the adoption of SEMAT is a consistency that we weren't getting previously. So if you had, like 3 people working on process, they all sort of come out with it a different way, and they have a different approach and a different way of articulating process. And what we're able to show with using Essence as the basis is that we have a consistency. And what's great is that you can look at, say, a process for managing, say, a proof of concept to managing a pilot, which we've got different goals within each of those. But we can see that we're reusing capabilities within both of those, and some of the activities are the same, and we're reusing them within those different engagements. And so I think that's really where we're seeing that, where we're able to demonstrate the value to management.
What would you say is the unique selling point?
So I think it's around that consistency and standardization. Yeah. Hi.
You added non-functional part yourself to the methodologies. How do you, did you miss any operational parts, operations within the method?
So we didn't add non-functionals to Essence. That Essence would cover non-functionals anyway, in part of you understanding your requirements. What I'm saying is that we had our own particular technique for getting non-functionals out from infrastructure processes, so that we wrote up that technique and then said, right, when we're at this point within requirements capture, then maybe this technique will help us. So that's how it was integrated in. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you use it to drill down into very complex projects, or is it used at a level to get an overview of an entire large project, but not to drill down to sub-projects?
So at the moment we aren't using any practices that are derived from Essence. We're just using the kernel, so it is at a very high level at the moment, and we need to kind of fill in those blanks at the moment. I'm very interested in what Ivar's company has been doing around user stories and Scrum, because those are very common within the work that we're doing. But yeah, at the moment it's still at a very high level. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it.